Good morning, I'm Raine Musñgi and welcome to Follow the Money. Join us as we explore the tools and insights you need to jumpstart your financial journey. Today we dive into the staggering economic toll of flooding and other natural disasters in the Philippines. With the country facing increasing risks from climate change, these events are impacting not just the economic or national economy, but also the personal finances of millions of Filipinos. Dr. Mahar Lagmay, Executive Director of Project NOAA, joins us today to explore how government initiatives, predictive technologies, and individual preparedness can mitigate these costs. Dr. Lagmay, thank you so much for joining us today. Good morning.
Hello, good morning, Raine.
Hi,
Thanks
sir.
for inviting.
Grateful you're here. Project NOAA, of course, the National Operational Assessment of Hazards, has been a pioneering force in disaster risk assessment in the Philippines. Could you start by sharing with us some of the initial findings from Project NOAA's risk assessment tool? How has this tool evolved to provide predictive and preventive applications for the country?
Yes, okay, let me start by probably introducing NOAA. It was launched as the flagship program for disaster risk reduction in the year 2012. And there were about probably 21 projects under the program, which was funded by Congress by approximately 6.2 billion pesos. That's a big amount over the span of 5 years. And some of these projects evolved and were institutionalized. And the best examples are the UP NOAA Center, which continues to help local government units innovate on disaster risk reduction efforts. We help them plan communities. Another is the Philippine Space Agency, which makes use of remote sensing data for many applications, including disaster risk reduction. Project NOAA actually mapped out the entire country for rain-triggered landslides and storm surges. And 70% of the Philippines also have detailed flood hazard maps because of Project NOAA. And according to the 2022 UNDP report, these maps and tools of Project NOAA are used by probably around 59.7% of local government units nationwide. On July 24 of this year, during the onslaught of Karina and the Habagat 2024 event, about 2.6 million search requests were received by the Project NOAA platform.
How come it's only 59% of LGUs using the platform?
I don't know. That's a big percentage already. Probably because it is not that widespread in terms of information. Probably national government should probably promote it more. We should promote it more so that all of the LGUs can know about the products of NOAA and the program that was launched in 2012.
I really think it's very helpful, especially we've actually tracked our personal data on Project NOAA, our residences and whatnot, all around the country, and it's actually very telling of whether we're at risk of flooding and even landslides. Now, given the data from Project NOAA, are there regions or areas in the Philippines most at risk of flooding and other natural disasters? And how does this data guide both local governments and residents in mitigating these risks?
That's a good question. We, along with our partners, have been analyzing the data sets for severe weather-related hazards. And in terms of exposure of the population to floods, Metro Manila, Bulacan, Nueva Ecija, Pampanga, and Rizal are in the top 5 most exposed to flooding. That's the population exposure. And for landslides, the top 3 are Cebu, Benguet, and Rizal. We actually have this data set for the entire Philippines, ranking the most exposed cities and municipalities all over the country. And these are the top areas that we need to prioritize. In terms of detailed flood hazard maps, they are also important because they are the basis for planning actions and mitigation measures against hazards. If your hazard maps are wrong, then all response actions will fail. Take, for example, the underestimated storm surges of Yolanda. When that happened, all prepositioned goods and placement of search and rescue personnel were overwhelmed by the storm surges because the predicted 5 to 6 meter high storm surges entered 2 kilometers inland. The underestimated storm surge hazard maps that were provided showed only danger a few hundred meters away from the coastline, and even evacuation centers were inundated, and those killed in those places where they were assured safe refuge were killed by the hundreds or even thousands. Right.
And Doctor, we're actually showing you some video from your presentation on Project NOAA. What have been the economic costs of flooding and disasters in the Philippines, both in terms of direct damage and long-term economic impact? Are there particular industries or sectors that are disproportionately affected? If I understand correctly, it's not just government that you're servicing through Project NOAA.
That's right. It's actually useful for different people, realtors. When you're buying your property, you can take a look at the maps that we produced in noaa.up.edu.ph. But for the question about economic costs, there are several sources. According to the EMDAT, which is the international database, we lose about 50 billion pesos each year from the direct impacts of severe weather hazards. This is not even mentioning yet the losses from lost opportunities, which run up to billions of pesos as well. According to the World Bank, on the other hand, total losses from natural disasters in the Philippines cost about $6.5 billion each year. The Philippine Statistics Authority has its own damages incurred by the Philippines from extreme natural hazards amounted to 463 billion pesos from 2010 to 2019, with agricultural losses amounting to about 290 billion, and infrastructure as well as private communication infrastructure amounting to about 106 billion and 66 billion respectively. Annual losses from typhoons are estimated to be about probably 1.2% of GDP to as much as 4.2% of our GDP. And because of climate change, this will change. This is predicted to increase to as much as 7.6% of GDP by 2030, and even as much as 13.6% of our GDP if we don't control GHG emissions into the atmosphere worldwide.
And that savings that we should have been spending on our education and healthcare. We will continue this discussion in a moment. We're taking a quick break. Follow the money. We'll be right back. Stay with us. And we're back with Dr. Lagmay. Dr. Lagmay, we were talking about all the economic costs of all these disasters and calamities happening to the Philippines. But of course, it's not just the whole country's damage that we're counting here. We can also count like how much it costs to our personal finances. Do you have numbers that would reflect this?
Well, I don't have the exact numbers, but I can tell you the possible impacts, because loss and damage to property and damage to houses will of course affect the finances of households, individuals. And if economic progress is always hindered by disasters, then the impacts will affect all of the individuals who are dependent or part of the economy. And my best suggestion is to be active in climate change adaptation efforts to curb the impacts of climate change. And there should be disaster risk reduction efforts. You have to be part of it in your community. And if your community is prepared, the less will be the impacts of natural hazards. And in turn, it will help all of us better prepare for the financial impacts.
Dr. Lagmay, are there measures that households can take to better prepare financially for such events? According to data and analysis from Project NOAA, is it an insurance moment? Would insurance coverage be a perfect answer or solution for these climate hazards?
tricky one. But anyway, that's probably one move that we can make. There are many insurance groups who actually use Project NOAA maps. We've had visitors from Global FM, some international groups, and some local insurance groups as well. And they tell us that they use the Project NOAA maps which are freely available. They are open data sets. And they also tell us that NOAA maps are superior compared to other maps that are available elsewhere and are very useful to them. And actually, insurance coverage would be one of the responses if all possible mitigation measures have already been exhausted. There's such a thing as residual risk. And when all alternative actions have been done and there are still potential hazard impacts that remain, minimal residual risk is best achieved with good urban planning. That's how you attain minimal residual risk, where you plan development away from areas prone to natural hazard impacts.
We'll talk about minimal residual risk in a moment, but for now, is there a role that government policy could play in addressing the financial impacts of disasters? And based on your findings, are there policies or programs that could be implemented or improved to mitigate economic losses?
Top of mind, there's what we call as the NCRMF, or the National Climate Risk Management Framework, where it emphasizes the probabilistic risk assessment approach. The probabilistic risk assessment approach, which may be a too technical term, I'll try to explain it, contains many scenarios for a particular hazard. Let's say, for example, for a flood scenario, there will be a small flood, a moderate flood, a large flood, and even larger flood due to climate change. Different types of scenarios for a particular flood hazard. Such scenarios enable us to plan for the big events that are worse than what we have experienced. With probabilistic risk assessment, we can prepare for the extremely large events such as Yolanda. And with probabilistic risk assessment, we will not underestimate the impacts of storm surges, just like what I gave as an example a while ago, and prepare adequately for the bigger calamitous events of the future, including the adverse impacts of climate change.
And perhaps also reaching the other 40% of LGUs that still are not tapping Project NOAA. Meanwhile, climate change is exacerbating the frequency and intensity of natural disasters. Is Project NOAA's data helping in predicting these changes? I know it's probably a slow kind of process of change, but are there economic models or predictions that can be also made for the future?
I don't know about the economic models, but what I can say is that we had Ondoy in Metro Manila, which was, according to the National Hydraulics Research Institute, a 180-year rain return event. That means that it happens once every 180 years. And then we had Karina in 2024, which when we looked at it, the rainfall record tells us that the return period is every 100 years. In between, we had extreme floods brought about by extreme rainfall events. We had the Habagat 2012, Habagat 2013, Habagat 2014, also the Ulysses event. I guess we also had the Habagat 2018 that made the Marikina River rise to phenomenal levels. This means that the frequency of extreme events have increased. And instead of experiencing such events every, let's say, 100 years or more, there will be an increase in their frequency. And if there's an increase in their in frequency, there will be more impacts. And if it happens every 10 to 15 years, therefore, the losses and damages will become more, and we need to prepare for this.
Now, I know in your presentation, there was some improvement that even Cagayan de Oro had noticed and noted with the use of Project NOAA's work and predicting the weather in their area. Now, with Project NOAA's findings, how do we improve urban planning and infrastructure development to better withstand natural disasters and reduce economic losses? Are there like solid recommendations that can be derived from Project NOAA?
Yes, of course. Good planning of communities is the quintessential anticipatory action. I'd just like to tell you a story of what we have been seeing from the database, particularly the international database called as EMDAT. EMDAT is the international database housed, I think that group is in Belgium. They've been tracking all of the inventory of losses and damages and impacts. And we found out that from 1986 to 2014, our number of deaths, the number of deaths from severe weather events was about 1,000 to 1,250. And then since 2014, we must have done something. Collective efforts of government and the private sector, as well as all individuals. We were able to reduce, after 2014, that number of fatalities from 1,000 to 1,250 to only 250 deaths per year on average. So that's I think that's a success story. It's probably attributed to a multiplicity of factors, including the whole of society approach, good policies like, for example, RA 10121 and the Climate Change Act. Perhaps also NOAA helped with the introduction of new technologies and high-resolution hazard maps for the entire country. But it is best to incorporate it into the plans of communities because we haven't made a dent on the losses and damages. It has remained constant according to the EMDAT database, which is about 50 billion pesos a year. So we need to do something about that. And I believe that good community planning across all sectors, those that are risk-informed and science-based, will transform into projects, programs, and activities that will help us adapt to climate change.
And that seems to be the dream. And on that note, flooding and other natural disasters in the Philippines impose significant economic burdens on both the national economy and the personal finances of its citizens. This highlights the urgent need for effective disaster risk management. And thank you, Project NOAA Executive Director Dr. Mahar Lagmay, for your contribution to keeping the mandate and the conversation going. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much to Raine, and thank you very much for inviting us.
We appreciate you so much. Before we go, we leave you with this quote from former U.S. Secretary or Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson. If you want to see the economic impact of climate change, look at how disasters are reshaping the financial landscape, both for nations and for individuals. And that's it for today's edition of Follow the Money. I'm Raine Musñgi. Thank you so much for watching. Keep it here on BNC, the Billionario News Channel, always on top.